Hello everyone, this is David Pakula. I'm recording this video from beautiful St. Petersburg, Russia. My wife and I have a house here outside of St. Petersburg, as well as a house in Miami, Florida. And we divide our time between the United States and Russia. And we've been doing this for 20 years or so now. And one of the frustrating things that I found about living in Russia is the language. I've been studying Russian for about 20 years now, and I would say I've made quite a bit of progress during that period of time. But there have been long periods of time in which it seems like I'm making little or no progress at all. And this could be very frustrating. Sometimes you learn something in a textbook or in your study of a language, and then you go out and talk to a native speaker or native speakers, you're at a party or whatever, and you find yourself just getting lost. And you feel like I'm never going to be able to do this. It can be very discouraging, and I have to give myself a pep talk at times. And what I do when I'm giving myself a pep talk is I'll remind myself of the progress that I have made over time. Sometimes it's really hard to see that progress and to measure it, but if you really think about it, I'll take myself back to a period of time, even a year ago or 2 years ago, and I'll remember how difficult it was for me to understand a native speaker, either watching TV or speaking to a person in real time. And if I really think about it consciously, I will realize that I have made progress. And that realization really helps me to keep going and to keep on studying and keep practicing and to not get discouraged. This phenomenon that I'm talking about is called change blindness. Change blindness is the inability to see small incremental progress over a period of time. And this is part of what we call a change bias. In the last video, I mentioned status quo bias. Now, status quo bias is where we have an unconscious preference for maintaining the status quo, for not changing. And change bias is where we really want to change, but we're not able to accurately assess our capacity for change. For example, I want to be able to continue studying Russian, but I find it difficult sometimes because of my inability to measure my own progress in studying Russian language. This can occur in very many different contexts in our lives. Like, for example, you want to lose weight. You want to quit smoking. You want to have better relationships. You want to make progress in your business. Whatever the case may be, sometimes you really want to change. You want to make a positive change in your life, but you just feel like you're not able to. You don't have the capacity to make the change. And so you kind of get stuck. And this could lead to decision paralysis, or just a feeling of stagnation, like you're stuck, you just can't make the change. Biases in general refer to unconscious tendencies of which we're not aware. That's why they're unconscious. And as I mentioned, we have the status quo bias, which is an unconscious preference for maintaining the status quo. And the bias that I'm talking about today is called change bias, where we want to change. We have an unconscious preference for change, but we just feel like we're not able to make the changes that we want. So what can we do about this? One way of overcoming an unconscious bias is to engage the conscious mind in a task that can help you to overcome that unconscious tendency. And so I'm going to talk about two strategies that you can use to overcome change blindness or change bias. The first strategy that I'll talk about is called self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is simply measuring through observation. For example, people who want to be more physically active often use devices that measure the number of steps that they take during the day. Now, this is fun. It's a way of having concrete evidence of your progress. And just the act of doing it tends to increase the activity that you're monitoring. So that's just one example of monitoring the number of steps that you take during the day, but there are many other examples that we could use. For example, with studying a foreign language, you could test yourself periodically to measure your progress. Or you can simply watch a Russian language video and measure your ability to understand the native speaker in the video over time. And maybe that way, that's something that I do, and it helps me to track my progress in comprehension. I periodically measure my ability to express myself verbally in Russian language. I do this informally. I don't have a formal process for doing it, but I just monitor myself. I observe how easy or difficult it is for me to express myself when I'm speaking to a native speaker. And even these informal ways of monitoring yourself can be very, very helpful in tracking your progress. The second method that I'd like to introduce to you is called temporal self-comparison. This involves evaluating concrete evidence to assess changes over time. And again, this can be done either formally, or it can also be done in a more informal fashion, where you're simply reviewing in your mind or imagining circumstances that show evidence of concrete change. One way that this can be done is, for example, if you're stuck in decision paralysis and you feel like you're never going to be able to really overcome it, and you wonder, why can't I make decisions? Why is it so hard? And you feel like it's always been this way for you, like it'll never change. But if you think about it and put yourself back in time and imagine 10, 20 years ago, or even in childhood, how you might have encountered some kind of challenge that required you to make a decision. And imagine how you handled that situation in your previous self, how you would have handled that when you were 15 years old or 25 years old, or whatever the case may be. Pick a concrete example of a situation that you encountered that was challenging to you, where you had to make a crucial decision in your life. And remember how you handled that. So your present self is now looking back to your past self, and with all the knowledge and experience that you now have, you're now advising your previous self how the situation perhaps could have been handled better, how the decision could have been made in a better manner. By doing this exercise, you'll appreciate how much you have changed and how much your ability to make decisions has improved. Sometimes this realization is all you really need to be able to appreciate that you do have the ability to change and to grow